A slender bronze hook slides deep into the nasal passage, piercing the thin bone that separates the world of breath from the seat of thought. There is no cry of pain, for the heartbeat has already ceased, but the silence that follows is heavy with the weight of a 1,000-year ambition. This is the first step in a meticulous defiance of nature, a process where the physical form is purged of its volatility to become a permanent monument. In the flickering shadows of the place of purification, the boundary between the sacred and the terrifying dissolves into the scent of cedar oil and the bitter sting of natron. This is not merely a funeral. It is an architectural project where the human body is the foundation for an eternal dwelling. The air in the chamber is thick with the aroma of burning frankincense, intended to mask the scent of the inevitable transition. To the ancients, the cessation of life was not an end, but a precarious bridge that required a sturdy vessel to cross. If the flesh were allowed to succumb to the natural rhythm of decay, the essence of the individual would be left wandering, a shadow with no home, fading into the void of the forgotten. To prevent this catastrophe, the masters of the craft begin their work by addressing the most delicate of structures. Through the narrowest of openings, the internal center of thought is liquefied and extracted, removing the very organ that once held dreams, fears, and the complex architecture of identity. What remains is a hollowed shell, ready to be filled with the substances of the earth. This extraction is performed with a clinical precision that borders on the supernatural. The practitioners do not see a person. They see a vessel that must be deconstructed before it can be rebuilt. The removal of the brain is not an act of desecration, but one of purification. In their worldview, the mind was a secondary passenger, while the heart remained the true pilot of the soul. By clearing the cranial cavity, they were removing the moisture and the potential for rot, stripping away the parts of the human experience that were deemed too fragile for eternity. The void left behind is often treated with rest, a liquid amber that hardens into a glass-like substance, sealing the vessel against the intrusions of time and the elements. Deep within the quiet of the workshop, the removal of the internal keepers of life begins. A small incision is made along the side of the torso, an opening through which the vital vessels are carefully withdrawn. These are the engines of the body, the lungs that once drew the desert air, the stomach that held the harvest, and the organs that processed the vitality of existence. Each is treated with its own specific ritual, washed in wine and spices, and placed within stone jars. These jars are not mere containers. They are guarded by the 4 sons of a celestial watcher, ensuring that even in the stillness of the tomb, the essential functions of the person are preserved under a watchful eye. The heart, however, is often left behind or replaced with a heavy stone beetle, for it is believed to be the witness of one's deeds, the only part of the self that must stand trial before the scales of the horizon. The tension in the room is palpable as the priests and embalmers move in a synchronized dance of ancient tradition. Every movement is a calculated step in a grander design. The removal of the organs is a delicate balance of biology and belief. The lungs, the liver, the stomach, and the intestines each represents a different facet of the living experience, and each must be purified of the earthly residues that cause the body to fail. This is the most dangerous part of the process, where the physical and the spiritual are most vulnerable to the corruption of the air. The use of palm wine and a mixture of crushed spices acts as a chemical barrier, a first layer of defense in a war that will last for millennia. With the interior cleared, the body faces its most grueling trial, the extraction of its moisture. For 40 days, the form is buried beneath a mountain of white crystals, natron, a naturally occurring salt that acts as a silent predator, consuming every drop of earthly fluid. This is the period of the Great Transformation, During this time, the skin darkens and tightens, clinging to the bone like parched leather. The features that once defined a face, the curve of a smile, the furrow of a brow, begin to sharpen into a mask of eternal stoicism. The person is no longer a creature of water and blood, but a creature of minerals and silence. This period of desiccation is a slow-motion transformation, a shedding of the temporary to reveal the structural truth of the human frame. As the 40 days pass, the natron works its silent alchemy. The salt pulls the life-sustaining liquids from every cell, effectively freezing the body in time. This is not a gentle process. It is a brutal chemical conquest of the flesh. The muscles wither, the eyes sink into their sockets, and the very contours of humanity are reshaped by the relentless pull of the crystals. Yet in this destruction, there is a strange kind of preservation. By removing the very things that allow for life, the embalmers are ensuring that the form can no longer die. It is a paradox of existence. To become immortal, one must first be rendered completely inert. The body becomes a sculpture of its former self, a rigid, darkened effigy that defies the laws of biology. As the body emerges from its salt-laden sleep, it is thin and fragile, a shadow of its former self. To restore the appearance of life, the hollows are filled with more than just air. Fragrant resins, bags of linen, and sawdust are packed into the cavities to mimic the fullness of a living being. The skin is massaged with oils, cedar, myrrh, and juniper to return a suppleness that defies the touch of time. The scent is overwhelming, a heady mix of the forest and the earth, a perfume designed to last for millennia. Every inch of the surface is treated with the precision of an artist. For the soul must be able to recognize its reflection when it returns from its journey through the dark regions of the night. The restoration process is where the artistry of the embalmer truly shines. They use pads of linen to fill out the sunken cheeks and replace the eyes with small stones or glass beads to give the appearance of sight. The goal is to create a likeness that is both recognizable and idealized. The face must look as it did in the prime of life, for the spirit, or the ka, needs a physical anchor to return to. If the face were to be lost to the ravages of the salt, the soul would be cast adrift, unable to find its way back to its temple. This is the ultimate fear of the ancient mind, not death itself, but the loss of identity in the vastness of the afterlife. Then comes the wrapping, a ritual of geometry and devotion. Hundreds of yards of fine linen are wound around the limbs, starting with the fingers and toes, each encased in its own individual sheath. It is a slow, rhythmic process, a cocooning of the self in layers of protection. Between the folds, small amulets are placed, tiny symbols of life, stability, and power, made of gold, lapis lazuli, and carnelian. These are the silent guardians of the journey, intended to provide the traveler with the tools needed to navigate the obstacles of the hidden world. The wrappings are more than just cloth. They are a physical prayer, a woven shield against the erosion of time and the prying eyes of the uninitiated. The wrapping is not merely a practical step to hold the body together. It is an act of binding the physical world to the spiritual one. Each turn of the linen is accompanied by incantations, words of power that are believed to weave themselves into the fabric. The amulets placed within the layers serve as keys and weapons for the trials ahead. A heart scarab is placed over the chest to ensure the heart remains silent during the weighing of the soul. A D-jed pillar is placed along the spine to provide strength and stability in the halls of judgment. Every piece of gold and every strip of cloth is a tactical decision in a spiritual war against the void. The final form is a masterpiece of stillness, encased in a hard shell of resin-soaked linen that hardens into a protective armor. But the physical preservation is only half of the struggle. Before the final closing of the stone doors, a ceremony takes place that is as dark as it is hopeful. A special instrument, often tipped with meteoric iron, is used to touch the face of the silent figure. This is the ritual of the opening of the mouth, intended to restore the senses to the deceased. It is the moment where the eyes are symbolically opened to see the new world, the ears to hear the songs of the stars, and the mouth to speak the names of the guardians. Without this, the mummy would be nothing more than a statue, a prisoner in a golden cage, unable to partake in the eternal cycle of the sun. The question that remains, floating in the dust motes of the tomb, is whether this elaborate process is a triumph over death or a desperate attempt to stall the inevitable. Is the soul truly housed within this preserved shell? Or is it trapped in a loop of physical memory, unable to fully move beyond the reach of the living? The ancients believed that as long as the name was spoken and the body remained intact, the individual would never truly vanish. This creates a paradox where the dead are always among us, staring through the bandages with sightless eyes, waiting for a call that may have been forgotten thousands of years ago. We find ourselves looking into these ancient faces, wondering if they achieved the peace they sought, or if they are caught in a beautiful, terrifying stasis. Deep in the subterranean vaults, far removed from the heat of the sun, the air is cold and the silence is absolute. The walls are covered in inscriptions, maps of the stars, warnings to intruders, and spells of protection. These are not decorations, they are a survival manual for the spirit. The thriller of mummification lies not in the act itself, but in the gamble it represents. It is a bet against the universe, an assertion that the human will can dictate the terms of its own existence long after the breath has departed. Modern science looks at the process through the lens of chemistry and biology, but the spiritual residue of the ritual remains a mystery that cannot be fully decoded. The use of rare resins and specific spices suggests a deep understanding of natural preservation, but the intent was always metaphysical. They were building a bridge out of linen and salt, hoping that the structure would hold under the weight of eternity. There are stories whispered in the dark of those who disturbed these resting places, only to find that the silence followed them home. It is said that to interfere with the preservation is to break a contract written in the stars. Whether or not one believes in curses, the physical presence of these figures is undeniably unsettling. They exist in a state between the living and the dead, a physical manifestation of a civilization's collective obsession with what comes next. They are the ultimate survivors, having outlasted their cities, their languages, and their gods. They wait in the darkness, witnesses to the rise and fall of empires, holding secrets that have been sealed away for 40 centuries. Imagine the perspective of the one being prepared, if any spark of consciousness remained during the transition. The experience would not be a descent into darkness, but an entry into a highly organized, ritualized landscape. The fear of being forgotten is replaced by the rigorous demands of the ceremony. Every step, from the first incision to the final wrapping, is a testament to the belief that the physical and the spiritual are inextricably linked. If the body is a temple, then the mummification process is the renovation of that temple for an infinite duration. The darkness of the chamber is not the darkness of the grave, but the darkness of the womb where a new kind of being is being forged. The materials used in the process were gathered from the furthest reaches of the known world, brought at great expense across deserts and seas. This speaks to a global obsession with the afterlife, a shared human impulse to leave a mark that cannot be erased. The resins of the Levant, the oils of the south, and the salts of the western deserts all converged in the workshops of the dead. This was the pinnacle of their technology, the highest expression of their understanding of the world. It was a craft that required both the steady hand of a surgeon and the unwavering faith of a priest. They were the first to understand that to conquer time, one must first conquer the nature of the flesh. As the heavy stone lid of the sarcophagus is lowered into place, the physical connection to the world is severed. The mummy is left in a darkness that is supposed to be eternal, surrounded by treasures and tools for a life we can only speculate about. Yet the presence of these figures in the modern world suggests a strange kind of success. They have indeed achieved a form of immortality, though perhaps not the one they envisioned. They have become windows into a past that refused to stay buried. Voices from a time when the boundary between life and death was as thin as a strip of linen. They remain as a challenge to our understanding of mortality, a silent reminder that the human story is much longer than we often care to admit. The horror of the process is often what captures the imagination. The tools, the extraction, the drying of the skin. But the true thriller is the psychological reality of it. To live one's entire life in preparation for the moment the bronze hook would be used is a mindset that is difficult for the modern mind to grasp. It is a commitment to the long game, a belief that the brief span of years on Earth is merely a prologue to a much grander story. The dark rooms where the embalmers worked were not places of sorrow, but places of intense, focused labor where the human form was refined into its ultimate version. They were factories of the eternal, turning the perishable into the permanent. Even today, when we peer through the layers of time, the mystery of the spirit remains unsolved. We can analyze the chemicals in the resins and trace the origins of the wood in the coffins, but we cannot know if the ritual worked. We cannot know if the heart, replaced by a stone beetle, found its way to the scales of judgment. We are left with the physical remnants, the darkened skin, the intricately wrapped limbs, and the silent, painted faces that stare back at us with an unsettling confidence. They seem to know something we don't, a secret kept safe behind the bandages and the stone. They are the guardians of a doorway we have yet to open. The legacy of this grisly art is a reminder of the lengths to which we will go to ensure our survival. It is a story of love, fear, and an unyielding desire for continuity. The process was gruesome, yes, but it was also an act of profound hope. It was a declaration that the human story does not end with a final breath, but continues in the silence, in the gold, and in the meticulous preservation of the self. In the dark corners of history, these silent travelers continue their journey, moving through the halls of time as a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to defy the shadows. They are the anchors of our collective memory. In the end, the art of mummification is a mirror. It reflects our own anxieties about the transient nature of life and our desire for something that lasts. We see in the ancient faces a reflection of our own struggle to be remembered, to leave behind a vessel that can withstand the currents of time. The bronze hook and the salt are merely tools in a much larger quest, the quest for the eternal. And as we look at the results of their labor, we are forced to wonder, if given the choice, would we also choose the salt and the linen over the void of the unknown? The silence of the tomb offers no answer, only the steady, unblinking gaze of those who have already made their choice. The shadows of the place of purification have long since faded, and the scent of frankincense has drifted away into the desert winds. But the work remains. In museums and hidden chambers across the world, the preserved elite of an ancient world continue to exist in a state of suspended animation. They are the survivors of a war against decay, the victors of a battle they fought with spices and stone. Their story is a thriller that spans millennia, a narrative of the dark, the divine, and the desperate search for a life that never ends. They wait in the stillness, encased in their protective cocoons, as the world above them changes, fades, and is reborn, while they remain exactly as they were intended to be.